Welcome to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio, the weekly radio news magazine we put together for you here at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy so that when you get into one of those conversations, you know which ones we mean. You have facts and background, and you've actually heard from many of the particulars who are involved in the stories being discussed. And one of the things that we have spent a good bit of time discussing here is the Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance, of which the Virginia Institute for Public Policy is partners with great groups like the Middle Resolution Group, and Kris Allen, Policy Director at Middle Resolution, is on the Newsmakers line with us this week. Kris, thanks for spending some of the weekend with us. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. And really, I don't think this gets said enough. Thank you for being such great partners with us in the Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance, and along with Americans for Prosperity and Heritage, really trying to get this message, I think, further, and I've been doing this here in Virginia for 16 years, further than I've ever seen school choice in Virginia. Do you concur, or have we done it? Have we gotten closer before?
No, this is the closest. We started this Chautauqua in 2015. The first year the bill reached the Senate floor and was defeated on tie. The next 2 years it passed in a restricted form. We've never pushed forward after that point, really, any bill that was successful. This year we got a broad support for universal ESA with a large number of constituents behind us from many different groups. The VEOA has put together an organization of over 60 organizations and thousands of people that support this, and we've seen a great demand for it. So I'm very pleased to see where it's at.
I recall when the scholarship program first passed, and many members of the General Assembly told me, well, that's it. That's the best we can do. And I had been warned about the scholarship program that if the General Assembly was to pass it and get it signed, they would never revisit the idea of school choice, claiming that, quote unquote, they had done school choice. And that turned out to be true for many years, but certainly forces like yours, Craig, and it certainly doesn't hurt having the force of nature known as Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears at our back to help this along there. But that being said, I had some folks who said the ESAs could have been a better attempt. What are we looking at? Because we have an event coming up very soon that people can get tickets for. There's an education summit coming up, and we will give you a chance to sign in to an online portal and Eventbrite page to get tickets to it. I hope you can join us there for it. But what comes next, Kris? What is next for education savings accounts in the Commonwealth? Is it on hold, or has it become a campaign issue for many of these General Assembly seats, especially as we're in primary season right now? Some conventions, some primaries coming up for nominations in these districts.
It's not going to be on the back burner. It's going to continue. Let's start with, I think, where you entered this question, with the summit that's coming up later this month, March 25th. Last year, we hosted a summit in Virginia, and it was the first time that we had ever hosted one. We had over 150 people attend it, and that was really the genesis of building a broad coalition of people across the state that support education savings accounts. This year, our hope is to take what we have learned, meet those same people and more on the 25th, and broaden our coalition, as well as look at other things that we can do in the area of education choice. Keynote speaker will be talking on micro grants, different ways that people have used this money to exploit its usefulness and provide choice to their children. And we are hosting, after that meeting, a strategy session, bringing the VEOA folks together to take the lessons learned from this past session and strengthening the bill. And we're looking forward to reintroducing it in a form that's even more user-friendly this next year.
Now, it is open to all, but there is an Eventbrite page if you go to eventbrite.com, second annual Virginia Education Summit, and you can get tickets there. And as you mentioned, the 25th of March. Don't wait on it. What are we hoping? Is it going to be in the same place as last year? Where are the folks going to be traveling to?
Yeah, it's going to be hosted here in the Richmond area. And I think you have the address there, but it's approximately 5 miles from the center of Richmond in the Virginia Commons area. So it's close to Virginia. It's central to the state. It's going to be, there are rooms available if you want to stay there. But we're trying to keep the price pretty low. I think it's $75 a ticket, so many people can attend. And it's only for one day this year. Last year we had an event on Friday to prepare people to run for school board. This year we're focused fully on education savings accounts and education choice, I guess, would be a better term in general. And how do we make this process going forward better?
And for the verbal affirmation, it's at the Virginia Crossings Hotel and Conference Center by Hilton, and it's in technically Glen Allen, which makes it a little easier. A lot of people, there's this Hadrian's Wall in their mind at Richmond, I-95, and so hopefully this opens it up to a lot of folks. But I want to go back to what you were saying about last year's event, where we had a little bit of training. I have been heartened in the areas that I've been hearing about it, and it is still early in the year, but there are an awful lot of folks who, inspired by I don't believe parents have any say in what their kids are being taught. The rhetoric of Terry McAuliffe have been inspired to stand up, and then they see what's happening in places like Loudoun and Fairfax and Albemarle, and saying, somebody needs to roll up their sleeves and do this. It's not an easy job to be a school board member, and it does take a lot of time, but bless these folks who are stepping forward across the Commonwealth. And if you're thinking about it, even if you didn't go to the training, I would suggest people should consider it and take a look into it. It's not difficult to file. It's not difficult to get started. But talk to folks like Kris at the Middle Resolution about taking that step. Kris, this would be that time to do that, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. There's a lot of leverage there. Last year, a number of organizations actually started focusing on school board races and were successful. That's number one. Number two, there have been trainings I know of recently where there were 75 to 80 people in the room, half of whom were school board members. The other half were looking to run for school board, trying to figure out how they can get involved. So across the state, we're seeing a real awakening around this whole area. And the idea of focusing on the child and not the system is exactly what we would like to see. So it's a good time to get into the race. As you know, in Virginia, every other year, we always have elections, but every other year, counties and cities swap off in order for school board races. So it's sort of every other year. There are some anomalies in there, but it's something that I think the average person can really get engaged with, and if they don't want to run for office, to help someone run for office. And you cannot be, I think, more engaged directly in your community than to be a school board member.
Without question. And the best part is here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, it's a nonpartisan election. You don't have to pick a political party. Everyone runs as just them. And certainly they may have friends who might want to support them, but it's as organic as it gets. And considering most areas spend between 50 and 70% of the county budget is the school division, it's an important job on that end as well. But I think the parents' rights is a big issue. We're visiting this week with our partners at the Middle Resolution and middleresolution.org, and Kris Allen, Policy Director with Middle Resolution. And we're talking about our Virginia Education Summit coming up on March 25th in Glen Allen. What was the reaction, Kris? Give a feel for what people came away with from last year's summit that we hope to either replicate or expand upon for this year.
Well, I think they got a good feeling last year for what actually an education success account, that's what we call it in Virginia, but an education savings account was. But there were a number of speakers who spoke, for example, Senator Rucker from West Virginia, where they passed a universal bill there a year or so ago, and her desire and lending of support to help us here. And in fact, she extended to us the opportunity to speak with the West Virginia Department of Treasury and other people there to understand how they had implemented the program. And in fact, this year we carried into our bill a number of features from that particular session. We also had speakers from Florida and other states that had successfully implemented education choice in multiple forms, particularly in Florida, where they went through step by step how they did that and sort of the critical success factors for making that happen. It turns out that a number of those folks, including national policy organizations that were there, individual contributors from states, all rallied together and worked with us this year in shaping this bill and making it, I would say, more user-friendly and updating it for things like ease of use through automation, reducing cost to implement, bringing in certain provisions that protect not only parents that homeschool and other elements to make it more constitutionally acceptable. So last year we really laid the groundwork for where we're going this year. We knew going into this year that we had a low probability of success, particularly with the Senate, where we do not control the Senate, and we figured that we would have, it wouldn't pass this year, but we would have the opportunity to draw these people together into a coalition, and that's exactly what has happened from across the state, and not only through the VEOA Executive Committee, but other local groups. We have found a lot of support. You can go online on the VEOA.org website and see about 20 minutes of testimony from people that we would have never drawn to this type of event in prior years. So, for example, there's a person that is a former school board member in the city of Richmond that testified. There's the Dean of Students at Virginia Union University. So there are a lot of different other groups becoming involved, and as we have more voices and more input, it's a better bill, and it's got what we need to pass this, which is people's support.
I was struck, and a couple of folks reached out to us and me as sometimes the more public-facing part of the Virginia, Virginia Policy, Public Policy Association, and that spoke to me and said it was interesting that they had never been involved with writing a bill before, and that they were fascinated by it. And I said, yes, everyone loves sausage. Nobody wants to see it made. But they chuckled at that thought and said it actually was more illuminating, and you understand better about how to incorporate all the, I think now retiring Delegate Rob Bell used to refer to it as all the unintended consequences of a bill, and how to think through, okay, well, if we do this, how could this be used incorrectly later on? And I think that was one of the takeaways that I was struck by, is a lot of folks had a better understanding of this process. And we're in a good state where each bill can only be one thing. You imagine how, some of these bills in Congress that are 8 or 9 or 12 different things all at once have to get made, right?
No, I agree with you. Just a short aside on how I got into the bill writing business. By training, I'm a nuclear engineer.
Wow.
In 2009, I decided that things weren't right, and I wanted to make a difference. And I came across an organization that still exists, I believe. It's Center for Self-Governance. And fundamentally, they trained you to pursue two paths. One was to run for office. The other was to write legislation. And I decided, well, what could one guy do, And I decided that education choice was one of those things that was strategic. So I would go down the path of writing policy. Well, this program isn't your typical program. It's for free, and you sit there for a day and you walk away. It had 5 levels, and without going through every step, you started out by just attending a free one-day seminar. If you got through that, the next one cost money, and the money doubled each time. It wasn't that much, but it doubled.
Right.
But there was homework to do. And the first homework was to go and talk to your representative and have him sign a piece of paper that you did it. I had 2/3 of the people left in. Anyway, this went on, and I finally got through the program, and it ended up with writing a white paper on whatever it is you wanted to support and go meet with your delegate. So I met with Delegate Jimmy Massey, who was leading education then, and at that point I was, I think, 66, something like that, and told him that I wanted to introduce this bill. And he said, come back in 5 years. Don't rock the boat.
Wow.
So I went, and Craig DeSessa and I found Delegate LaRock, who was then a freshman in the General Assembly. He said he'd support it. And the first year, as I told you, the bill got through the House and the Senate, only to be tied in the Senate because a Republican walked on the bill.
Right.
And then, so after that, it became a learning curve. But you learn something every time that you introduce this in the General Assembly. You've got to listen. I try to find common ground with people that would oppose it. But at the end of the day, I think it only makes sense to the average individual. I'm sure you're familiar with the Virginia Code, Section 1-240.1 on parental rights. The parent has a fundamental right to make decisions about their children's upbringing, education, and care. And that is what is at issue here. And I think that when we can entertain more choice across a wide variety of options, competition will start to right the ship. Right now, we don't have competition, and clearly, those that are economically disadvantaged, or even middle-income families generally, can't decide just to pull their child out and do something differently. they're trapped in the school zone or the zip code that they're in unless they move. And so we've got to fix that situation. And
Right.
to be clear, so that this doesn't come across, since I'm a nuclear engineer, I'm an all of the above energy guy.
Yes.
I'm an all of the above education guy.
Oh, sure.
And so I want to see public school improve.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see children thrive. And I want to see the measurement to be student achievement. That's what we need to seek. Mm-hmm. And every child's different. So anyway, a short story on getting there. And the reason I brought it up is I'd love anybody that wants to write policy to join me and, help us write these bills and follow these bills
Yes.
out there. And you can be trained to do it. It's not that difficult. It just takes a little bit of energy and just, as you said, you've got to understand how it works in the code and then be willing to do that work. So
I appreciate it. Kris, thank you so much, and you and Craig, and thank you so much for your partnership at middleresolution.org. And again, it's an Eventbrite page for our Virginia Education Summit coming up on March 25th in Glen Allen. Thank you so much for your time this weekend, and we'll see you there on March 25th.
Thank you.